Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here today because we're about to unlock one of the biggest secrets to speaking fluent English naturally and confidently. This isn't going to be a lesson about complicated grammar rules or endless vocabulary lists. Today, I'm going to show you a method that works faster, feels easier, and helps you sound more like a native speaker. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why native speakers sound so natural when they speak, but when you try to speak, it feels awkward and unnatural? Maybe you've spent months or even years studying English. You know the words, you've practiced the grammar, you can understand what you hear, but when it's time to respond, your mind goes blank or the words just don't come out right. It feels frustrating, right? I know exactly how that feels because I've been there. I remember studying English for years, memorizing long lists of vocabulary, practicing verb conjugations. But when I actually had to have a real conversation, I froze. I knew the words in my head, but I couldn't make them come out naturally. And I started to wonder, why does it feel so easy for native speakers, but so hard for me? And then I discovered the secret. Native speakers aren't thinking about grammar or vocabulary when they talk. They're not translating sentences in their head. They've trained their brain to respond automatically, using patterns and flow. They rely on natural speech rhythms, not rules. And that's exactly what we're going to train you to do today. Because here's the truth. The fastest way to become fluent in English isn't to study harder. It's to copy native speakers, to listen to how they talk, mimic their patterns, repeat their expressions, and match their tone. That's how your brain starts recognizing language automatically. And that's when you'll start speaking without thinking. And don't worry, you don't need to be perfect. The goal isn't to sound 100% like a native speaker overnight. It's to feel comfortable and confident when you speak. And the fastest way to get there is to model your speaking after native speakers. So stay with me, because today I'm going to give you a step-by-step plan to copy native speakers and transform the way you speak English. And once you learn this method, you'll feel more fluent, more natural, and more confident every time you speak. Let's get started. Most English learners believe that knowing more vocabulary and studying more grammar will make them fluent. But that's not true. If you've ever found yourself memorizing long lists of words and practicing grammar exercises, but still freezing up during real conversations, you're not alone. The problem isn't that you don't know enough. It's that your brain hasn't been trained to use English naturally. Here's why. When you study grammar and vocabulary, you're learning information, but speaking is a physical skill. Just like learning to play the piano or ride a bike, it's about muscle memory. You don't become fluent by memorizing, you become fluent by doing. Native speakers don't sit there thinking about subject-verb agreement or the past participle. They're relying on patterns they've heard thousands of times. Think about how you learned your native language as a child. You didn't study grammar or memorize vocabulary lists. You listened to people talk. You copied what they said. And over time, your brain started recognizing the patterns automatically. You knew that after someone says, "How are you?" you respond with, "I'm good." Not because you studied the rule, but because you heard it over and over again. It's the same with English. When you copy native speakers, you're not just repeating words. You're training your brain to anticipate the next word and to match the natural rhythm of the language. That's why copying is so powerful, because it builds those automatic speech patterns. Let me give you an example. I had a student named Diego from Brazil. He was incredible at memorizing vocabulary. He knew the definitions of hundreds of English words. But when it came time to speak, he completely froze. He would overthink, try to form perfect sentences in his head. And by the time he figured it out, the conversation had already moved on. So I told Diego to stop studying. and start copying. I had him watch a simple English TV show and repeat exactly what the actors were saying. He copied their tone, their intonation, and their natural speech patterns, even the way they paused between words. After just a few weeks, his speaking completely transformed. He stopped hesitating. His speech became more fluid and natural, and his confidence skyrocketed. This works because copying bypasses the thinking stage. When you repeat patterns enough times, your brain starts to recognize them automatically. You stop thinking and you just respond. It's like hearing your favorite song on the radio. You don't have to stop and think about the lyrics. You just know them because you've heard them so many times before. That's the power of copying native speakers. You stop trying to build sentences from scratch, and you start relying on familiar patterns. That's why native speakers sound so natural and effortless when they talk. They're not thinking. They're using patterns their brain has already locked in. And that's exactly what we're going to train your brain to do. In the next chapter, I'll show you exactly how to start copying native speakers step by step, and how to use this method to start speaking English more naturally than ever before. If you want to sound like a native speaker, you need to train your brain the way native speakers learned, by listening, repeating, and adjusting until it feels natural. This isn't about memorizing, it's about copying speech patterns until they become automatic. Here's a simple step-by-step method to do exactly that. Step 1. Find the right source. The first step is to find high-quality, natural English to copy from. TV shows, movies, YouTube videos, and podcasts are perfect for this because they give you exposure to real-life conversations, not scripted, textbook English. But be careful. You don't want to jump into complex content too early. If you're a beginner, start with content that's simple and easy to follow. Children's shows or beginner-level podcasts are great for this. If you're intermediate, try sitcoms or conversational YouTube videos. The key is to pick something where you can understand at least 70% of what's being said, so you're not completely lost. Step 2. Listen actively next. Don't just listen passively. You need to listen with intention. Pay attention to how native speakers connect their words, how they shorten or combine them. For example, I am going to. I'm gonna. What are you doing? What you doing? Do you want to? Do you wanna? Native speakers rarely say every word clearly. They blend sounds together. That's why you might understand individual words, but struggle to follow fast conversations. When you start hearing these patterns, your brain will begin to catch them automatically. Step 3. Repeat out loud. Now comes the most important part, repeating. After listening to a sentence or phrase, pause the video and repeat exactly what you hear. Match the tone, the rhythm, and the speed as closely as possible. It's not just about the words, it's about the flow and the delivery. Don't worry if you can't get it perfect at first. The goal is to start training your brain to recognize and produce these patterns. For example, if you hear, "I'm gonna grab a coffee," don't say, "I am going to grab a coffee." Say it exactly how you heard it. "I'm gonna grab a coffee." If you hear, "What you up to?" repeat it word for word, including the contraction and the tone. This step is powerful because it forces your brain to get used to the natural rhythm of English, which is exactly how native speakers sound so smooth and confident. Step 4. Record yourself and adjust. Finally, record yourself repeating the phrase. This step is crucial because you need to hear yourself to spot what's working and what's not. When you listen to your recording, ask yourself, does it sound natural? Is my tone and speed similar to the native speaker? Am I blending the words the same way they are? If it sounds off, adjust and try again. It's not about perfection. It's about training your brain to adjust naturally over time. The more you practice, the smoother you'll sound. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say you're watching a scene from Friends. Joey says, "How you doing?" Now, instead of just laughing and moving on, stop the video. Repeat it. "How you doing?" Match his tone, his facial expression, his confidence. Then record yourself saying it. Play it back and compare it to the original. It might feel awkward at first, but that's how you build fluency. The more you copy, the more natural it becomes. This process works because it's how native speakers naturally learned their language. They didn't study grammar rules as kids. They copied what they heard. And that's exactly what you're going to train your brain to do. If you want to sound like a native speaker, you need to understand how connected speech works. Native speakers don't speak in perfectly separated words. They blend sounds together naturally, and that's why conversations sound so fast and hard to follow. The key to mastering fluency is to stop listening for individual words and start listening for the overall sound and flow of the sentence. Let me give you an example. When a native speaker says, "I am going to grab some coffee," they don't say it like that. They say, "I'm gonna grab some coffee." Did you catch that? Going to becomes gonna. The sound blends together, and that's why it sounds so fast. Here's another one. "What are you doing?" "What you doing?" Instead of hearing it as separate words, native speakers blend the sounds together. That's why it feels like they're talking too fast. But they're not. Your brain is just trained to hear individual words instead of natural speech patterns. Connected speech happens all the time in casual conversations. Here are some common patterns you need to get familiar with. Going to, gonna, "I'm gonna call you later." Want to, wanna, "Do you wanna go out?" Did you? Do you? Do you see that? Let me, lemme, let me help you with that. Got to, gotta, "I gotta go now." Native speakers do this naturally because it makes speaking faster and more efficient. Once you start recognizing these patterns, conversations will suddenly feel slower and easier to follow. Now, let's practice. I'm going to say a phrase slowly, and then I'll say it fast. Your job is to repeat it at full speed. Going to, gonna, "What are you doing?" "What you doing?" "Did you eat yet?" "Do you eat yet?" "I have to go." "I have to go." "Let me know." "Let me know." That's how you train your brain to process connected speech automatically. The more you practice this, the more natural it will feel. At first, it might feel uncomfortable or awkward, but that's a good sign. It means your brain is adjusting to a new way of processing language. Here's a simple exercise you can try every day. 1. Pick a scene from a movie or a TV show, just 10 to 15 seconds. 2. Write down what you think they're saying. Try to catch the connected speech. 3. Then listen again and see if you missed any blended sounds. 4. Repeat the sentence at full speed until it feels natural. This is how you close the gap between knowing English and speaking English. Connected speech is the key to sounding fluent, so keep practicing until it becomes automatic. If you want to improve your speaking speed, rhythm, and pronunciation, shadowing is one of the most powerful techniques you can use. Shadowing helps you develop the muscle memory for speaking English naturally, because you're training your brain to match the flow and tone of native speakers. So what exactly is shadowing? It's simple. You listen to a native speaker and try to repeat exactly what they say in real time, matching their tone, speed, and rhythm as closely as possible. It's not just about pronunciation, it's about training your brain to process language faster and speak more naturally. Let me break it down into 3 simple steps. Step 1. Find the right source. Start with a short clip, about 10 to 30 seconds long. This could be a scene from a TV show, a movie, a podcast, or even a YouTube video. Make sure the conversation is at a natural pace, not too slow or too fast. Example, you could pick a scene from Friends or The Office. Those shows are perfect for natural everyday conversation. Step 2. Listen and repeat at the same time. Play the clip and try to repeat exactly what the speaker says at the same time they're saying it. Don't pause. Just keep going, even if you miss a word or two. Example: if the actor says, "I'm gonna head out now, you coming?" You should try to say it in real time. "I'm gonna head out now. You coming?" It will feel difficult at first, but that's normal. Your brain is adjusting to the rhythm and pace of natural speech. Step 3. Keep practicing until it feels natural. Repeat the same clip until you can shadow it perfectly. Focus on matching the tone and natural flow of the speaker. Don't worry about small mistakes. The goal is to stay with the speaker without hesitation. Let me give you a quick example. If you're practicing with the phrase, "What are you doing later?" native speakers will naturally say, "What you doing later?" Try to repeat it exactly how they say it, blending the sounds together. Now, let's try it right now. I'm going to say a few phrases, and I want you to shadow them immediately after me. "I'm gonna grab some coffee." "Did you see that last night?" "What you up to?" "I've gotta head out." The more you practice shadowing, the faster you'll improve. At first, it might feel awkward, but that's a sign that your brain is building new connections. Here's the key: don't worry about getting it perfect. Focus on the rhythm and flow first. Accuracy will come naturally with practice. Try to practice shadowing for at least 5 to 10 minutes a day. You can even use subtitles at first, but try to wean off them as quickly as possible. The goal is to train your ears and mouth to work together automatically. This is exactly how native speakers learn to speak their language. They weren't memorizing grammar rules. They were listening, repeating, and naturally picking up patterns. Shadowing helps you do the same thing, and it's one of the fastest ways to sound more fluent. If you want to speak more naturally and fluently, stop focusing on individual words and start focusing on phrases. Native speakers don't think in single words. They think in patterns and phrases they've used thousands of times. That's why their speech sounds smooth and natural. They're not thinking about grammar. They're pulling from familiar patterns automatically. Let me give you an example. Instead of learning the word help by itself, learn how native speakers actually use it. "Can you help me with this?" "That was really helpful." "I could use some help." See the difference? Learning phrases like these gives you a ready-made response in conversation. You don't have to create a sentence from scratch. You already have the pattern in your brain. Here's why this works so well. 1. It reduces thinking time. You don't have to translate or figure out grammar rules in the middle of a conversation. 2. It improves flow. When you know common phrases, your sentences sound more natural and automatic. 3. It increases confidence because you know exactly what to say in different situations. Let me give you some high-frequency conversational phrases that native speakers use all the time. These are the kinds of phrases that will make you sound more natural immediately. "What's up?" A casual way to say hello. "How's it going?" A common way to ask how someone is. "I'll catch you later." A casual way to say goodbye. "No worries." A natural response when someone apologizes. "Let's grab some coffee." A common invitation to hang out. Now, let's try a quick exercise. I'm going to say a common situation, and I want you to respond using one of these phrases. 1. Your friend says, "Hey, I'm sorry I'm late." You could respond with, "No worries." 2. Someone asks, "Hey, how have you been?" You could say, "I've been good. How about you?" 3. You're leaving a conversation. How would you say goodbye naturally? "I'll catch you later." That's how you build fluency, not by memorizing random words, but by building a mental library of phrases that you can pull from automatically. And here's a tip. Start paying attention to how native speakers respond in conversations. When you hear a useful phrase, write it down and practice using it in your own conversations. You don't need to memorize thousands of words. You just need to master the most common 500 to 1,000 phrases. If you know how to say, "What's up?" and "No worries," you already sound more fluent than someone who knows 5,000 words but can't put them into a sentence. So, focus on phrases, not individual words. This is how native speakers communicate. And now, you can too. One of the biggest barriers to fluency is perfectionism, and it's holding you back more than you realize. If you're constantly worried about making mistakes, you'll freeze up, hesitate, and avoid speaking altogether. But here's the truth. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. They mix up grammar, forget words, and mispronounce things. But they keep going. The goal isn't to speak perfectly. It's to communicate confidently. When you focus on getting every word right, you're putting extra pressure on your brain. And that's why you freeze when you try to speak. Let me tell you about Diego. He was obsessed with speaking perfectly. Every time he made a mistake, he would stop and try to correct himself. But that made him sound unnatural and robotic. Once he let go of perfection and focused on flow instead, his speaking improved almost instantly. Here's the key. If you don't know how to say something or you miss part of a sentence, don't panic. Native speakers miss things all the time, but they recover smoothly. You can do the same by using simple recovery phrases like, "Sorry, can you say that again?" "I didn't catch that. Could you repeat it?" "What was that last part?" These phrases help you stay in the conversation. Instead of panicking and shutting down, let's practice right now. 1. Imagine you're talking to someone and you miss a word. What would you say? "Sorry, can you say that again?" 2. Someone says something too quickly. How would you respond? "I didn't catch that. Could you repeat it?" 3. You heard most of what they said, but missed the last part. What would you say? "What was that last part?" See how natural that sounds? No one expects you to be perfect. They just want to understand you. And here's the truth. Most native speakers are impressed when you try to speak their language. They don't care if you make mistakes. They care that you're communicating. Think about it. If someone learning your native language made a mistake while speaking to you, would you laugh at them? Of course not. You'd appreciate the effort. It's the same with English. So stop trying to be perfect and focus on communication instead. Mistakes are part of the learning process. And the more mistakes you make, the faster you'll improve. And here's the bonus. When you stop worrying about being perfect, you'll actually sound more natural and fluent. Fluency isn't about accuracy. It's about flow and confidence. So next time you're in a conversation, don't stop when you make a mistake. Just keep going. Use those recovery phrases, stay relaxed, and trust that the person you're speaking to wants to understand you, not correct you. Remember, confidence beats perfection every time. One of the fastest ways to reach fluency is to combine listening and speaking practice, because listening gives you input, and speaking gives you output. Most learners focus too much on one or the other, but the real progress happens when you strike a balance between both. Think of language learning like a conversation. You can't just listen without responding, and you can't just speak without understanding the person talking to you. If you spend all your time listening to English without speaking, you'll understand a lot, but struggle to form sentences. On the other hand, if you only focus on speaking without listening, your conversations will feel unnatural and disconnected. That's why you need a 50-50 balance between listening and speaking. When you train both skills together, your brain starts to form the connections it needs to respond naturally and quickly. Here's a simple plan to balance listening and speaking practice every day. Step 1. Listen actively, 15 minutes. Choose a YouTube video, podcast, or TV show and focus on the flow and tone of the speaker. Don't just hear the words, listen for how they link together. Pay attention to connected speech and patterns. Step 2. Speak immediately after listening, 15 minutes. Pause the video or podcast and repeat what you heard. Try shadowing. Repeat the speaker's words with the same rhythm and tone. You don't need to get it perfect. Just try to match the flow. Step 3. Track your progress, 5 minutes. Keep a notebook where you record the phrases you learned. Write down the ones you struggled with, and try using them in a sentence later. Step 4. Record yourself once a week. At the end of the week, record yourself speaking for 2 to 3 minutes. Talk about your day, describe something you learned, or create a conversation scenario. Compare it to the previous week's recording, and notice how much more natural you sound. Let me give you an example. Diego, one of my students, was really good at understanding English, but when it came time to speak, he would freeze. So we started doing a 50-50 balance. He'd spend 10 minutes listening to a podcast, and then immediately try repeating what he heard. After a week, his brain started adjusting, and his speaking speed doubled. The key is to practice listening and speaking together, not separately. When you train your ears and your mouth at the same time, you build automatic responses. So when someone asks you a question, you don't have to think about the words. You just respond naturally. And don't worry if you make mistakes while speaking. That's part of the process. Fluency isn't about getting every word right. It's about keeping the conversation going. So here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, follow the 50-50 rule. Spend 15 minutes listening and 15 minutes speaking. Track your progress. And by the end of the week, you'll notice a huge difference in how confident you feel when you speak. Listening gives you the building blocks. Speaking puts them together. You need both to become fluent. Building a daily speaking habit is the key to long-term fluency. Speaking English consistently, even for just a few minutes a day, is far more powerful than cramming for hours once a week. It's like working out. You won't get fit by going to the gym for 5 hours once a month, but you will get stronger if you work out for 10 minutes every day. The key to building a habit is to make it simple and consistent, so you stick with it even when you're busy or tired. Here's a powerful daily speaking routine that you can start using right away. Morning. Describe your day out loud, 5 minutes. As soon as you wake up, start thinking in English. Describe what you're doing out loud, even if you're alone. Example, I'm making coffee. It smells good. I need to buy more sugar. This forces your brain to switch into English mode and starts training your mouth to form sentences naturally. Afternoon. Shadow a podcast or video, 10 minutes. Find a short video or podcast from a native speaker. Play 10 to 20 seconds, pause, and repeat exactly what you hear. Match the speed and tone of the speaker. Example, if you hear, I'm gonna head out now, repeat it exactly as you heard it. Try to copy the flow and pronunciation. Evening. Talk with a language partner or record yourself, 10 to 15 minutes. Find a conversation partner, online or in person, or record yourself speaking about your day. Example, today I went to work. It was busy, but I handled it well. If you can't find a partner, talk to yourself. Pretend you're having a conversation with someone. Why this works. This routine works because you're combining different types of speaking practice: solo thinking, listening, and real conversation. It builds muscle memory, which means your brain starts producing sentences automatically. For example, I had a student named Rachel who used this exact routine. She started every morning by talking to herself in English while making coffee. In the afternoon, she shadowed a podcast for 10 minutes. And every evening, she recorded herself talking about her day. Within 2 weeks, she noticed that words started coming more naturally, and her confidence in conversations doubled. The secret is consistency. Don't wait until you have an hour of free time. Start with 5 minutes a day. A little bit of practice every day builds confidence faster than a long study session once a week. Fluency doesn't come from studying, it comes from speaking. And the fastest way to sound natural and confident in English is to copy native speakers. We've talked about how to use shadowing, connected speech, and common phrases to start speaking like a native. Now it's time to put it into action. Here's what you need to remember. Copy native speakers. Focus on the flow and rhythm, not just the words. Use shadowing to train your brain to produce speech automatically. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for communication. Mistakes don't matter as long as you're understood. Now it's your turn. Find a short video or podcast from a native speaker and start shadowing. Focus on the flow. Try to match their tone and speed. Then practice using those same phrases in real conversations. Don't wait until you feel ready. Fluency comes from action, not perfection. Start speaking today, even if it feels messy. And keep going. Every time you speak, you're getting better. Commit to practicing daily, even if it's just 5 minutes, and you'll be amazed at how fast your speaking improves. You've got this. Now go out there and start speaking.